Welcome to our Learning to Lead presentation for this month. It is on fostering resilience, and we are fortunate to have with us Lisa Benitez, who I hope I get this right, is the clinical director for the Presbyterian Counseling Center. She's also a licensed mental health counselor, and she has a lot of other little letters after her name on the website. And so I can invite her to share that with you a little bit more, but she has done many wonderful presentations for us in the past, and we are excited to have her with us again today to offer us. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it right over to you and let us get started. Jump right in.
Thank you, Cheryl. I've known Cheryl a long time before I had some of those letters. And so, yes. But it's great to be here with you today. I am honored to spend some time doing what I love doing, which is sharing with people different things about our universe, about our world that help us be better at doing what we do. And also just, I believe, help us be better at connecting with each other and better with working with people specifically. So as Cheryl had said, I am a licensed mental health counselor, a clinical director with the Presbyterian Counseling Center, but I have worked for many years in ministry and continue to pursue my education when time allows me to. But currently, I'm still not finished with my PhD in infant and early childhood development, which basically is the science of attachment. And so I'm going to take that attachment science that I very much appreciate and I integrate fully into my life, both professionally and personally. And I'm going to share with you some of the recent science about attachment and how that is especially relevant when we are working in ministry and pastoral settings, how we can take some of that attachment theory and the science and how it can help build and strengthen the relationships that we have with the people that we serve and work with. But in addition, how can we also help the people that we're ministering to and working with, and them in turn have better relationships within their families and within their intimate settings? And so I love talking about this work. It is fascinating research, and I'm just thrilled that others are wanting to hear about it more today as well. So before I get started, I do want to just have us say a quick moment of prayer, and I'll be started on our PowerPoint. Dear Lord, I thank you for the ways within this world that we learn more about each other, learn more about ourselves. I appreciate that we can be open-minded and curious about this world and not be intimidated by the science, because it is your hands, your mind, that we in turn manifest and learn more about each other and how we glorify you. So I ask that we approach this time with open hearts, open minds, and that whatever questions, whatever things come to mind, that we have a safe place to share and learn more. I appreciate these people who do your work, and I ask that you continue to strengthen us throughout our day and time forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I will share my screen.
Lisa, do you have a preference on how to handle questions, or do you mind if folks pop them in the chat, or if they raise their hand during your presentation, or would you rather wait till the end?
Because we only have an hour, probably the chat and waiting till the end will be great. I have more than an hour of stuff to talk about, but I'll kind of, I guess you could say, cater to the audience right now. And so there may be some things that take a little bit longer to talk through, or maybe more significant, versus there's some that I can gloss over a little more quickly. So I would like to maybe use a chat. We'll keep it to the end, but I want to know who's on the call really quick too, so it can be relevant. So I
Okay.
don't know if people don't mind introducing
I'm
themselves really quick.
I'm not sure that Karen is still on. I know she had another meeting and was going to come back with us. Jacqueline and Samira, can you unmute and just share with Lisa a little bit about yourselves?
Mommy, would you like to go first or should I?
I love it. I love it.
Uh, I'll let you go first so that
No,
then
you
I
can
can
go.
piggyback
I
off
can
of you.
piggyback. Oh man. Okay. So, hi, Dr. Carson. It's good to see you, meet you again.
Good to see
Hope
you.
you're doing well.
Thank you.
And Miss Lisa, nice to meet you. I'm Samira. I'm actually a undergrad student at UCF studying psychology, clinical psychology. And I am just an advocate for mental health. I actually wanted to pursue clinical mental health counseling, but my plans have changed. I actually want to go into school psychology to enhance mental health resources and help children academically in schools. So that is what I want to go for grad school, specifically my PhD. So I'm really excited to learn more about how you can incorporate faith and psychology and mental health and stuff like that. So
That's definitely the path I'm in. So I'm so glad you're here. Congratulations, Samir. That's exciting.
thank
Very nice
you.
to meet
Um, Hello everyone. Hi, Miss Lisa. I'm Samara's mom,
you.
and with having this really all came about, I would say, because having my youngest has autism and ADHD, and then I have another child who was dealing with some mental health challenges. And so this was more of a personal thing for me. But then as I was listening to your introduction, just being able to use this not just personally, but also as a way of ministry to be able to just understand further the challenges that people are going through and be able to understand how what you know what what things that I can do to be a better listener, to be somebody that people feel comfortable being able to come to me and just share what they're going through. I think mental health is just such a really big um topic right now, and I think it's just something that we really need to be able to advocate more for in the churches, in schools, and in our communities. So I just, being a personal thing, close to home, I just want to be a better advocate for it, and somebody who can just really support others who are going through this. And you know so I just want to, this is just my way of just learning and then being able to give back somehow.
That's lovely. Excellent. Thank you. It's great. And then Karen may still be on the other call. Okay. Well, hopefully, as Karen joins us too, she'll know she can jump in, and I may just want to get a brief idea of her needs. So I must apologize. I have a little bit of a nose itch here. I'm like, oh, this wasn't the time I wanted to have that. As you get to get that round recording, Cheryl. That's great.
At least it's
so
a
we're gonna
small box right now.
yeah. So we're going to look at a lot of objectives, and so we're going to conquer a lot in the hour. And I see a clock of 17 minutes, so I'm assuming yeah, we're 12:14. Okay. We're going to look at, there's an actual theory behind resilience. There's a lot of study and research behind it, so we're going to touch on that briefly. We're going to look at how the brain is impacted by stress in particular, and especially how brain as an organ is affected by traumatic events. And then in turn, those traumatic events do cause changes with how we manage emotion or affect regulation. And that is relevant when we look at our world and how we handle anger or pain or various experiences, and helps us understand a little bit when people have suffered significant events in their life. It does in turn manifest with how they handle themselves emotionally. We're going to look at then some of the impact around the people who are working with those individuals who may struggle mentally. So there's a vicarious traumatization, such as people in ministry receiving kind of the contagion, the social contagion impact of working in people when they're struggling, or with people when they're struggling, compassion fatigue, burnout, and then secondary traumatic stress. So we're going to touch on those terms. And then hopefully, as we wrap up the hour, we're going to have a little bit of a different understanding of how we can manage all of those things above, various problems with managing emotion, the vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress, and have a different integration of the resilience science that can help us manage those things better. And I'm going to touch on how this serve and return concept, which is attachment theory, it's a relational concept of how we engage each other and the world, is part of that coping. And as if time allows, how you can then take all this information and apply it moving forward about your day and about your work, how it may look as you coach, practice, and support each other. So it's a lot, but we will definitely cover. And you, I believe, all should have access or the copies of this PowerPoint and some other attachments, I believe. So
I sent them out yesterday, and I'll also post them where we can access them.
Awesome.
The video.
Awesome. So I'm going to use one of the current most prolific researchers right now in the field when it comes to resilience is Dr. Maston. And she is actually British. She's done a lot of her research overseas, but she thankfully is a prolific author and loves to share her studies about the phenomenon that we now understand. Why is it that we can have two siblings from the same family with same experiences, but the characteristics, unfortunately, that they may inherently already be born with may then cause one to be more vulnerable than the other to various ways that they adapt to their world and develop. So we can have twins even, and we know one may have more success than the other, or we may see one who may be more compromised than the other. And so this resilience theory is studying what is it about the characteristics that may have good outcomes despite serious threats, or how we may struggle with adaptation, or we may know people who have been exposed to very serious, significant events, but end up changing the world in remarkable ways. And so there's a lot to who we are genetically, environmentally, chemically, and all of that kind of comes together in beautiful creation and in our human beingness and in our humanness. Some of us are better at bouncing back, bouncing forward, moving forward, and some are not. And so resilience is looking at how we can do better despite some of our circumstances, and how we can, I love that kind of saying, we can play a bad hand well, like turning lemons into lemonade. We often use that kind of thinking, and not always expecting the best in life, but whatever we are dealt with, whatever we are given, whatever the odds are, that we can hopefully help defeat the odds and still move forward. I think about all these athletes right now with the Olympics. I'm sure some of you may be watching that, but we hear some remarkable stories. One such as Simone Biles. I know she's getting a lot of time right now with TV and media, but she is one who has definitely shown us, despite her age of being 27, I believe. And as many of you know, she did back out of the last Olympics because of her mental health. But how is it she was able to come back 4 years later and still accomplish so much? So she is right now a great example of resilience. And so resilience defined is often used to explain how differences in how well individuals cope with adversity. That is a lot of summarizing of resilience. But any thoughts, again, feel free to put it in the chat. So I'm a lot of other researchers out here, and I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because some of this may be just extra, but I want to highlight the third bullet point here, which is the therapeutic actions that we need to focus on, like steps that may be taken in order to reduce the negative chain reaction. And so there's an element that to this quote from Dr. Rutter that I think is really important for us to realize, that there is still this locus of control that we have, that there is this element that we do know with intervention, with strategies, with various treatment, I guess you could say, that we can actually change the trajectory. And a great example of that is, and I'm sure many of you know, there was a time that we would institutionalize people who were mentally ill and who had special needs. But now, over the course of science and understanding our world and understanding people better, we were able to create environments and create a therapeutic, medical integrated environment where these people could now live and work amongst others who didn't have those limitations. And so that is how resilience has helped us grow. And we've been able to deal with what I would say reducing the negative impact of limitations or mental illness and health, and being able to still have people have high, what I would say, high functioning lives. And so this protection may also lie in how we can create positive results too. So we help people continue to grow and develop, just like what Somali, and I'm hoping I'm saying your name correctly, was talking about, her choice of working in the school system. Oh, Samira. I was shrinking our screen so that we know we can have better access for our kids in our schools. So the implications of this work basically means that, didn't mean to do that. I apologize here. I'm trying to make so where I can see my complete screen and not have some of you cut off here. And I'm just wondering how to make that there. Okay, I figured it out. So there are some complexities to this theory. We do know that you can have a layered effect of your life, that there are various things that impact us. But there are small things that can have big effects. And as we continue to talk with people, sometimes we want them to accomplish big, great things, but resilience theory is encouraging us to just take one step at a time, put one foot in front of the other, be open-minded, try some things differently. And no matter how long that may take, that we will always work towards better outcomes and how to stay enthused and focused. We know that resilience theory is starting to be integrated into many settings, not just within mental health, but within businesses, within school systems, education, both what I would say higher learning, within government. So we're noticing that it's developing into a framework of how it can be translated into so many areas of our lives, not just within direct work with people. And because of all that, we are seeing this approach is really making a great difference in the lives of the people around us. I touch on job stress, in particular within the US, as we all are living here in Florida. Unfortunately, we do know job stress leading source of stress amongst adults, and we are unfortunately starting to see a rise in stress levels within children, teenagers, college students, and elderly. And the reasons here listed below, which I'm sure are not something new to you. You probably are all very familiar because we all have access to media and all the various social networks that we probably have that ping our phone or send us emails or send us messages. But we know that these things are growing in our world. Plus, we are becoming a larger population. There's 8 billion of us on the planet. And we know that we have access to information at a much more faster rate. And so it is becoming much more well known of when people are struggling in the real time. We're hearing about these things. But in addition to becoming a bigger planet, we are becoming a lot more spread out from each other, which does shrink some of our resources and access to who we call close family and friends, who would be our people we'd lean on or lean into, which can cause deterioration within us, therefore affecting stress a little bit more. And so I bring up the stress here because that's where resilience theory started to really come into the more current way of researching. Because why is it that we now have more sophistication than we've ever had? Why is it that we have more access to medical care and more access to resources to help us feel more safe and secure and live longer? However, stress is still on the rise. And so it's because stress still is considered the modern day disease. despite all the things that we have in our lives to help reduce stress, many will say they're more stressed than they've ever been. And that's how resilience theory had birthed, because stress does manifest in many different ways, and it does have this whole series of events. So this is where I want to talk a little bit about the brain changes from long-term stress and the types of stress, and how, unfortunately, when people go, I just want to be able to handle things like I used to be able to handle, or I just want to be the person I was when I used to be able to do that kind of work. Well, we just know it's the natural wear and tear of our lives and the natural impact on our bodies, that stress is going to affect us physiologically, emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally. And unfortunately, to live is to feel stress. And so there's no way that we can try to compare ourselves to how we once were. So how do we then think about ourselves on a little bit of a different mindset and each other? But unfortunately, we do know that the more pervasive and persistent the stressor may be, such as people who are serving in our military and may be in active combat, or people who have been egregious traumatic events, that unfortunately those events and those situations, because of their pervasiveness and the persistence of them, does start to translate into a change within who they are and their brains. And once we have a stress reaction, so to speak, once we have a response to the stressor, our bodies start to go into what we would say like an automatic response. There's no way we can change our brain and how it responds to stress. All we can do is, once we have been activated because of the stress, being mindful of now what our body's going through, and then understanding that whole biochemical reaction is what we can then do. And then how to help give ourselves some care and self-care post-traumatic exposure is what we try to do. And then, of course, prepare ourselves in the future moving forward, understanding our past events. So there is a belief, and there's, again, this is all backed by science, that there's about 1,400 chemicals that are actually released in response to a significant stressor, and 30 hormones. And those things are released into our bloodstream for various reasons. And here's just some of the things that they do. There was a time, obviously, when we would have to fight for our food, and we'd have to fight a lion. And so that stress response was to increase our heart rate and our blood pressure so we can make better decisions when we had to fight for the food. Or our blood sugar would rise so we'd have more energy so we could run faster or get up that tree if we had to. Or if we needed to be able to lift something heavy to fight for the food. And blood was shunted from the gut so that if we were injured, we wouldn't bleed out so quickly from some of those internal organs. And then the large muscles of our arms and legs would have increased strength, and then clotting would actually be able to occur better so we wouldn't bleed out so fast. So those are some of the automatic things that our body would actually go through from those 1,300 chemicals and those 30, or was it 1,400 chemicals and 30 hormones, something like that, if I went back to the previous screen. But we know that all those chemicals that are released into the bloodstream have a purpose and intent. Here's the challenge, though. A lot of our stressors nowadays are not because of physical demands. And so we can still have stress in our lives from the traffic that we're driving on I-4. Or we still have stress when we're concerned about two family members in our extended family who are having a hard time getting along or finding compromise or communicating. Or we can still feel stress from the daily wear and tear of our schedules and the grind of just wanting to get home and get food on the table. So stress now has definitely changed. However, our stress response has not. And there's the dilemma. Much of our stress today is because of this release of adrenaline, cortisol, and all those other hormones and how it affects on our body. But now it can lead to a change in our chemistry, which leads us to feeling some of these things that we've already been talking about mentally and emotionally, feeling more separated, isolated, alone, depressed, and then even some of those long-term states of being when we are alone then turn into loneliness. And then stress is caused by extended loneliness or extended bereavement or extended depression. So it's unfortunately what I would say like a double-edged sword. So stress can cause some of these things, and then extended states of these situations and mental health or physical health challenges can then in turn cause more impact of stress. I highlight here that the research is showing us that stress can contribute to depression, anxiety, and these final three things here, gastrointestinal tract and skin and other organ struggles, is because when someone shows up at an emergency room, we know within a 50 to 70% range that there is some level of stress that led to that ER visit. And even though they may be showing up with, they're having a hard time keeping food down, they have a terrible skin rash that won't go away, or they literally feel like they're about to have a heart attack, we know that there's probably some connection to stress there, because stress has a tendency to show up physically in three different ways. It can cause us to have some type of GI upset, nauseous, diarrhea, difficulty eating. It can cause significant chain reactions and rashes to the skin. And we also know that it can cause headaches. And for someone, they may actually feel like they're about to have a heart attack when it may be, in turn, unfortunately, stress related. I have COVID. I do know that I was burning my candle, they say, at both ends of the wick. It was my daughter's birthday. We were entertaining family and doing a lot of stuff for her birthday, and we were doing a lot of stuff. And sure enough, I was exposed to, I'm sure, someone who was, but all that, not sleeping, running around, probably not eating the best, and pushing my energy boundaries led to me being vulnerable to COVID. So I don't know how we're doing in the chat and if there's anything worth just checking in about, Cheryl, or should I keep moving on?
We have not gotten any comments in the chat. I did see Karen hop on for a moment. She's back with us. So I didn't know if you wanted to take a second to have her introduce herself like we had Jacqueline and Samira do.
Yes, please. Hi, Karen. I just wanted to get a sense of, who you are and your time with us today and wanting to make it relevant. Maybe there's something about your life and where you are that I could try to focus on or highlight.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm juggling meetings. There's just an example of stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So I live in Orange City, so north of Orlando. Very involved in our church in Deltona. Love it. Love the church. Interested in this topic. We recently had a women's group meet, and the discussion was, what season of life are you in? And I would describe it as transition. So later in my career, changed jobs recently. And we're looking at moving from Orange City to Pearson. So lots of transition, which is exciting and terrifying at the same time. So it's just, my point would be just trying to keep it real, as you go through a time of change. That's all. Just trying to, one thing at a time, so.
Nice. Welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
That is a big change. Orange City to Pearson.
Lots of change.
Lots of change. Yes, a change. And I'm familiar with both of those areas. So,
oh, good.
Yeah, nice. And I'm assuming you want land. Is that part of why you're moving to Pearson?
Yes. Yeah, we purchased some land years ago, and we're moving out there for some more land.
And animals probably to put on it.
Animals as well. We traveled a lot in our younger years, and so most folks, when they get closer to retirement, they want to travel. We really don't. We've done it. We have one trip coming up, and we pretty much are happy to stay home. So we plan to, we're downsizing in house and upsizing in animals and land.
That's awesome. Which animals are very therapeutic and also
Yes.
being very grounded with the earth. And
That's
so
true.
yeah, and it makes a lot of sense if we want to continue to manage the various stressors to how do we stay connected within the resources that I believe God has given us, which are animals and our earth. So
Outside
nice.
and sun and
Yep. Very nice. Very nice. So
yeah,
I'm going
thank
to
you. I'm
touch.
sorry to interrupt your flow. I apologize.
Oh, yeah, no,
I've
no, it worked out beautifully.
catching up. I've been on for a little bit.
Great. No, that worked out great. So I mentioned those previous comments of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and burnout and all that, because I do care about people who are in this work. I am both, I call myself like a hybrid practitioner. I both supervise and help teach and give guidance to those who are learning and those who work in the field, but I also need to stay relevant and I have my own caseload. But I do that because of these terms. I do that because I know if I exclusively just did one or the other, I would probably eventually have some of this as you've been doing this work for a long time. But I also, no, it's just good to be mindful of when I may need to take some extra time for myself, or I may need to do something a little different because of the various things of how this work can affect us. So compassion fatigue is when we know that we're just feeling really spent emotionally because we care for others. However, in that caring for others, we may not have a lot of time to replenish and recharge. Compassion fatigue may also be this idea that we're just not feeling as empathetic towards each other or as compassionate with each other. And so compassionate fatigue or compassion fatigue is a very common dynamic that all of us who work with people will experience at least once, if not more. And I don't know if we talk enough about it. So I touch on that again, just being real and transparent that it is a very common dynamic to experience. Now, burnout is a little different because of this emotional exhaustion or feelings when we're just not feeling like we're doing the work well. So if you'll notice the difference with compassion fatigue, we're still doing great work. It's just the work now is really taking its toll on us and we don't feel like we can be as empathetic towards each other. But this idea of burnout is when we just feel like we can't really make a difference and we're not feeling appreciated. So some of these symptoms also may look a little different, like this idea of what I can't imagine if I were to, leave this place and go to this other place, then it would look different. So these escape fantasies would maybe start to appear in our thinking. We may start to see ourselves get chronically sick. We'd be more a little irritable and we would notice frequent exhaustion. So there's a difference between burnout and compassion fatigue. But again, both are very real. And I think, and this is just a theory, can't say I can back it up with anything or anyone right now, but I do believe that one of the reasons this generation and Samira may be able to speak to this, I think they do move around a little bit more within their occupation and within jobs. I think probably because of burnout. And so this idea of just, being able to try different things, do something different when they may start to feel powerless. It's okay though, that we have a world and a life that allows us to do that. So that is about burnout. And so now I'm going to touch on trauma because the other parts of what I'd say, like the occupational hazards of working with people, is also affected by trauma. And according to these two bodies, one is our National Association for Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and then the other is like our organization for the professionals. We had to make these formal definitions because some of us may think trauma is something it's not. I kind of experience the same with bullying. Like if they're bullying me, and there really are some technical terms for these things. And so here's a technical term for trauma, and that is the unique and individual experience of violence and the victimization, including sexual abuse, physical abuse, severe neglect, loss, domestic violence, and or witnessing of violence, terrorism, or disaster. So this is the direct cause and effect of someone who has been either in or directly exposed to some type of egregious situation. So I was not in New York City at the time of 9/11. Was I exposed to all of the aftermath and in the math of 9/11? Yes. Could I say that I was a traumatic I was a traumatic survivor of 9/11? No, I cannot say that. Can I say that 9/11 has affected me? Absolutely. But I do not call myself a victim of the experiences of 9/11. But there may be some people who feel that way. There may be some people who have a hard time getting on airplanes because of 9/11. Or there may be some people who have a certain feeling about the events around 9/11 because of that. And so we just want to make sure that we're all using the same terms. And I'm not saying that those people haven't been affected, but to say that they've actually been a trauma survivor of it or a victim of it, I don't know if we could qualify that. But there may be some other things going on with them that we would need to understand. And then according to this other definition, which I think is a little bit more less technical, but trauma is, we know, from an event or series of events, set of circumstances that is experienced by someone physically or emotionally, which then they may feel like their life has been threatened. And that is a real significant term, that they felt like their life is going to be over, their life has been jeopardized, and therefore now they have a lasting adverse effect on their life, which affects their functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, spiritual well-being. And so that whole collection there of words, but I highlight the life-threatening event. That's really what's pivotal here, is we know that someone is a victim of trauma because they literally have felt physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that their life was going to end and be over. And because they felt as if their life was going to end, here's where the brain and stress response comes into importance for us today. We have various ways that we survive. And we know that everyone handles stress differently and everyone handles survival differently. But these are the most common responses that we can talk about today. And so this fight or flight response, which I'm sure probably most of you have heard, or this freezing and surrendering response, this traumatic reaction of the brain is what then turns someone's state, like that is an actual state of responding. So just going to give an example, which I'm sure most of us can attest to. We've probably all been in some kind of car accident to some extent, a fender bender or something even more serious, or witnessed a car accident. And so how all of us handle that car accident, or in the past, how we handled it, was probably different. Some of us may have gotten out of the car and started running to see if the other people involved were okay. Some of us just wanted to run away and didn't know where to park their car or didn't know what to do and would call and ask someone else for help. Or some of us froze and weren't sure who to call, what to do, what do we need to have happen next. And so that is the brain's reaction in either a hyperarousal state or a dissociative state of our brain's chemical reaction, like I mentioned in the previous slide, of all those hormones and chemicals that are released into the bloodstream. And then they cause us to then have a whole cascade of behaviors, thoughts, feelings of how to handle that traumatic event. That is typical. That is what our brain is meant to do. We are unfortunately not intended to be in a car accident every day, every week of our lives. So fortunately, hopefully most of us have not had too many. That's what the brain is meant to do, to survive and get us through that accident. However, there are some people who do deal with, metaphorically, a car accident every day. There are some people who deal with a threatening spouse, or there are some people who deal with a work environment that's very hostile, or there are some people who don't have an income or don't have a roof over their head. And so unfortunately, that trauma response or stress response of the brain is so frequent and so often that now it's turned that stress response as a state of being and now into a trait of being. And this is what makes our work sometimes challenging. To be angry and hyper aroused in certain situations are okay, but you may know of people who may be like that more often than not. So how you can approach someone who may be frequently angry, or how you can approach someone who may be frequently defensive, or how you approach someone who's frequently depressed or shuts down. This is what makes our life more challenging. And the challenge is, some will say, because of their history and because of their story and what they've been exposed to, their brains have now changed. And now these traits have become so part of who they are. How do we then work with them? And this is what vicarious trauma would look like. So this is a really interesting part, and I can't see the chat, and I'm hoping I'm still, keeping you all intrigued and curious. And I don't know if I need to take a quick break for any reason. I know we only have like 14 more minutes, but I do want to
there's
just check in.
There is nothing in the chat at this time.
Okay, great.
I'll try to let you know if something pops up, but maybe.
Oh, okay.
Karen, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if this is part of the previous slide, but that is the topic of can you go back one slide? Just your examples, and that we deal with that in work situations, in family situations, and in church situations. And it's really a difficult one when someone, you don't know what is causing them to be sometimes aggressive, towards other people. And so I take any counsel on that, in a work situation. We just had something come up that was just incredible in this day and age. It happens at church as well. Sometimes people react to something over the top, and it can be offensive to another member or visitor, and even in a family situation. So that's a tough one, because I don't want to ignore it, right? Because that in a way condones it, but you also don't know what's causing it. So that topic is as you're walking through that, I was like, whew, yeah, that hits close to home.
It sure does. Right. So I'm gonna pass over these three slides, I think, is what I skipped over for your question, Karen, and knowing the time. I believe most of us know about vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress. It's just, unfortunately, because of the way that emotions are contagious. So we cry at movies. We cry when we're with each other in the time of pain. And so there is this element that trauma exposure or pain exposure can actually transfer from one person to another. And so that's what these two topics are covering. And if we have time, I'll go back. And naturally, because you're in these settings, Karen, working with people directly, all of us are exposed to all of those elements. And so I want to cover these couple slides, and then I definitely want to answer that question of how we can be better. So if we try to, and I'm trying to remember where this slide is. Okay, actually, this I think I can tie into answering. And I didn't put this in a slide, so I apologize. I know this is recorded, so I'm going to do this just because I'm realizing it probably would have been really helpful to add this if it, in hindsight. Anyway, so in that moment when we are having a stress response and we notice that our heart is beating fast, our skin may be turning red, our pulse, we start to feel it in our neck. Like there's all these physical things that we start to feel physically as a result of stress. That is that chemical reaction and that loading in our bloodstream of all the things that our body is meant to do, going back to the earlier slide of that hyperarousal state or that dissociative state. So because that is a chemical response, we cannot talk someone out of that. All we can do in the moment is be with someone and sit with them to help with the managing of that. We can't talk someone into not being angry. We can't talk someone into not being upset. But while they're angry or while they're upset, we can hopefully help manage and cope with it a little differently. That is more of a behavioral kind of intervention than it is a cognitive intervention. Does that make sense, Karen?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yep.
But we often want to talk someone into not being angry, right? Like
or
you
react.
don't know what you're
React.
talking about, right? You need to stop. That does not make sense. That's not the truth, right? Like we start to have this conversation with someone who's being maybe irrational or not factual and we try to give them the truth or we try to give them facts. But in that moment, and this is why I want to cover back about what goes on with the brain, they are emotionally and physically manifesting a stress response that we cannot stop their brain from doing, but we try really hard. Does that
Can
make
I,
sense? Go ahead.
sorry, I was listening to Karen's question. I was listening to your response because it's funny you say that because like I said earlier at the beginning when we were introducing ourselves, I have a son who has ADHD and has autism, and he has a registered behavioral therapist. So when you're talking about the behavioral part of it, and there's things that we're trying to teach him with having the ABA therapy. I'm sure you probably heard of.
I am very familiar. Yes. Yes.
And you're right. You can't talk to somebody who is angry. And we try to explain to him it's okay to be angry. Everyone has a right to be angry. The Bible tells us we have. But then the Bible gives us a caution, right? There's that warning, but sin not, right? And so as a parent, just I'm learning that when somebody acts in a way that may seem an overreaction, there's like you mentioned stress. I would say yes, stress, but I say to myself, what is causing somebody to act out that way? And something I've learned was the antecedent. What caused that? And this is all through the ABA.
Yeah,
The
ABC,
behavior,
right? It's the ABC.
right?
Yep.
And then the consequence, right?
Yep.
And so what I've been reading lately is that a lot of adults are being now diagnosed with ADHD. ADD is not really a term. This is based on a magazine I've been reading, right? That is not really a term that's being used. They don't use ADD no more, but they use the ADHD. But some people would say, well, I'm not hyperactive. But I don't know. There's a hit and miss with that. But I'm wondering if a lot of people may have ADHD as adults. They're being diagnosed with it, or even now you've got a lot of adults being diagnosed with autism too. And like you did say earlier, we just locked people up at an asylum, or we just separated them into, I don't want to say colonies, but we separated them and say they were different, they were other. But
Right.
now with research, medicine, we can't do that because the population has grown and we don't use money in that way anymore. So we're going to have to learn to be able to say, okay, my son doesn't have a neurotypical brain, and now he's got to be able to function in society with someone like me who does. See, all this verbiage, I'm just like learning.
Yes. So you shared a lot, and thank you. I want to, be mindful of time, and I'm okay going a little bit over if you all are. If you need to hop off, I understand, because we may go a little bit over with your questions. And again, I want this to be relevant and helpful. Neurodevelopment and neurodiversity is a new term, and some will say that we have to label it because then it helps us with knowing how to treat it. But if we go back to my earlier slide, that the brain is different for all of us. And some of us have a higher functioning brain than others. And I hate to use those terms because I don't want it to sound like some are superior than others. It's not that at all, but some have the capacity to handle more stressful events more so than others. We just know that. And some of us have the capacity to handle more stressful demands and jobs and lives than others. And so as we pivot and adapt environments based on what someone can handle and what someone can function within, that's when those who may be able to lead us with creating those environments can be more compassionate and empathetic and sympathetic to those who may not, but recognizing that we all deserve a quality of life and we all deserve freedom and all the beauty of this world that it has to offer us. So with your son and with your situation, Karen, that you were mentioning at work, you can't talk someone, regardless of how they see that event, right? That antecedent, like they are perceiving whatever event that they are in the middle of as a potential threat, period. Their brain is is unfortunately responding to that situation as a threat, whatever it may be. And typically, the threat for them may not be as big as we could identify or understand, but all it takes is one little thought of a potential threat, and the brain has an automatic response, if that makes sense. So in the moment, it may feel threatening, like say you made a comment and it didn't come out the way you were hoping it to be said, and then you later go back and repair it, and then you try to clarify your comment. But once that person heard a potential threat existed because of what you said, and then you try to repair and fix it, their brain is already reacting. Like they can't undo what was just said, even though they probably hear you and they say, I understand, and they say that, but their brain is still dealing with threat, warning, warning, warning. Like our bodies have a built-in alarm system. And the same with your son, Jacqueline. His unfortunate circumstances and his feeling threatened by this world are deep and wide. And so he is feeling lots of ways taxed and stressed because of the environment, and his brain is trying to respond to those frequently and often. So trying to manage how someone is dealing with the environment makes it very difficult. So this is why I bring this up. We can't talk someone into feeling better. We can't stop the brain from doing what it's doing. All we can do in the moment is try to be better at noticing when someone is feeling a stress response, and then be compassionate, understanding, and empathetic towards them by giving them space and maybe reducing how much we talk and allowing some more environmental, what I say, like first aid. So such as, and this is where I go to this, we need to probably encourage people to know how to calm themselves down and offer some self-care. So like children who have ADHD, children who have autism, and adults, they may carry fidget toys, if you've ever noticed, and they do like to fidget. And so that may be a good time to give them something to do with their hands so they don't start to strike out or they don't start to hurt themselves or other people. So that's a part of a self-care plan. Or we may need to stop the meeting right now. We may need to all give each other some space. We may need to go to the bathroom. We may need to go get a refreshment. We may need to physically separate ourselves from people who may be upsetting us, because the body needs to know that it's okay to feel upset, but the person or the situation that may have felt threatening is not within my eyesight or not around me. Like you may have to physically like show that this is happening. So this is a way that we know we can help people calm down or help with the body's reaction to stress. And some people may have a different ask of a way to calm themselves down. Some people need to go outside. Some people may need to go for a walk. But we do know, because stress is a physical reaction of the sensory system, we need sensory elements to help us calm down as well. So the sensory elements activating what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell. Wait, did I already say? Yeah, see, hear, taste, touch. I feel like my brain is a little bit on the foggy side. But the sensory load is what's very soothing. So I'm just going to give a personal disclosure here. Unfortunately, I'm hoping to be attending a funeral, if I'm negative for COVID, on Saturday, of a colleague who was killed from domestic violence last Friday. It made the news. She was stabbed by her husband in her driveway. He had been abusing her for 30 plus years. And so as we as a community are grieving and dealing with the loss of a community member who made such a big impact in our world, you know, when at her funeral on Saturday, there's going to be a lot of tissues. There's going to probably be a lot of things to help us calm down. There's going to be a calming atmosphere. It's not going to be loud. It's not going to be bright. It's not going to be an element that's only going to intensify us, right? Like we need an environment that is going to help us, because we are already going to be activated with our senses, right? We're going to be seeing things, hearing things, dealing with things, sensing things that are going to be very activating. And so typically funeral homes and situations around those things, as you notice, are a little bit more calming. The environment is a little bit more slow. There are things about those kind of settings that are meant to be sensory, calming, and soothing, right? So we see it, but we may not realize it. That's why, like, when people go shopping, they have lively music playing on the stage. Like, have you ever been in those really loud stores where the music is blaring? That blaring music is meant to activate your senses to buy more. Or you look at a restaurant menu and they show you these beautiful pictures of the food that you want to order because you're really hungry and you want to order it all, right? You don't just want to, a main meal. Now they want to get you an appetizer and they want to get you for dessert, right? So all of that sensory load is a part of our world and is very much represented in how we handle things. Oh, so I don't know if we lost Karen. She may needed to jump off, but did she have to go? Oh, there was a little chat
Yeah,
here.
there's, she said she needed to drop for another call. Have a wonderful,
Oh,
blessed rest of the week.
yeah, I'm sorry she had to go, but I understand. So, okay. So going back to coping, if Jackie and Samira can stay with us just a little bit longer. So all of this brain science and all of this to be said, that we just want to be really good at respecting boundaries. That is a great way to help with coping. If someone says, I need space, please give each other space. That is a really important thing. If someone says, I cannot talk right now, we cannot force someone into talking, but we do try to do that. If we don't talk right now, we're not going to resolve that. I hear that a lot. It is so important to help respect boundaries and stay within them as a way to cope and to be brave. That I think bravery has a natural chemical release. If I tell myself I can handle hard things, I can conquer this, I can handle this mountain, there is an endorphin release that is naturally a response to being able to say something positive to ourselves. And that feeling or wanting to be brave actually is a nice brain reaction. To be able to remind ourselves that we can solve problems, find the positive, of course, having something to do outside of our work by having a special interest that self-care already talked about. Laughter is also a great way to cope. And remember, tomorrow is another day, and lean on each other when necessary. So resilience theory is encouraging these very relational ways of coping. If you notice, I didn't put in here breathing. I didn't put in here necessarily exercise. I didn't add like, go ahead and follow this meditation, because resilience theory is reminding us that with each other together, we can handle things together as well. Isolating yourself and asking you to handle things alone is actually what I would say non-resilient or non-relational. And so some of these things are asking you to stay in relationship with each other and use the relationships that are given to you, which can help in turn build resilience. So Jackie, going back to your son, if that's okay. So after he may have a moment of, we'll maybe call it meltdown. Is that probably what sometimes it may be called in your house with him if he has a meltdown? I know you're on mute, Jackie, but I don't know if she can answer. So anyone, if they're having a meltdown, we'll just say that. If someone's having a meltdown and then after they do some self-care and they're feeling like they can be in relationship with us again. Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi, I heard you.
Okay, great, great. I was just trying to think of being able to answer your question about when your son is struggling. But the time to try these coping skills are not when they're having the meltdown, right? That we want these as like kind of all of our safety plan or all of our wellness plan, that we all have these various ways of coping with life and that we use those coping skills when we do need them the most. So using and leaning on each other. Okay. Social connectedness is very, very important to be able to know who to go to in a time of need, to be able to have the resources available to us and people who can help us solve problems, because isolation is a very high risk factor. And so I just add on here, 1 Thessalonians, therefore encourage one another, build each other up, just as we're doing. And there's so many things to building healthy relationships. So I have a few more slides and then we're going to wrap up. But it is important to listen more than we talk, because listening can help others feel valuable and that they are cared for, that we model how to deal positively with strong emotions. This is all what resilience theory and attachment theory teach us, because when we witness other people handling hard things, we learn from each other just by watching. That communication is not all verbal, but a lot of behavioral communication. Body language is also a form of communication. So when we see others handle hard things, we learn from that. And no matter what, that we always preserve dignity, that we learn to respect each other, as it's a human right. And especially when people are feeling compromised, it can feel embarrassing for someone. So how do we still remember to respect them even when they're struggling? And to be mindful of ourselves, to know our own challenges, our own situations. So if we are experiencing some burnout or some compassion fatigue, or we are dealing with some secondary trauma, that we do know how to help ourselves and how to take care of ourselves and be reflective of that. When we are working with people, to ask empowering questions that are open-ended, to encourage discussion that is genuine and heartfelt, and always just remember that energy attracts like energy. So if we are feeling positive and hopeful and encouraging, hopefully that will in turn draw that out in others. And so there's just so much. Cheryl, I know we got a late start, but let's see. I didn't get into serve and return. And I could always do a part 2 if we need to. and we can, and I can always meet with you both a little bit later. You can reach out to me. I think my email address is connected to the email that Cheryl sent out. But I do know that if we can practice some of those healthy relational concepts that I just mentioned in the previous slides, then the more we facilitate that kind of healthy engagement, the more that we know we can facilitate healing, both with our personal and our work relationships. And what I think is a really neat thing is that in turn, when we are being better at relationships, we actually have then, I guess you could say, improved our spiritual life and development, which is really interesting to think about, because as we are able to see evidence of being better and working with people, it just shows how being with each other helps expand the body of Christ. And connection is a way to cope. And connection is a way that I think God intended us to be. We just, for some reason, are struggling sometimes with how to connect with people when we're hurting, or other people seem to be hurting us. And that's what the resilience theory is saying. If someone is hurting, just remember that their brain is reacting to a threat. And you can't tell them that they're not in danger. They just have to work through that element within their body, but eventually they will in turn be grounded again, and then you can talk to them. And let's see, I have this last concluding slide here as we wrap up. And I don't know, you may hear I'm getting some thunder and lightning in my part of Volusia County here. So I don't know if you all are experiencing the same thing, but in conclusion, stress is unavoidable, especially in our workplace. There are many risks for people who work in ministry and work with people. And so I'm really glad that you were willing to hear a little bit more about what we can do to understand their brains and understand ways to be in relationship with each other. And so it's critical that we're reflective about how this work is affecting us and about the people that we serve. And there are ways to care for each other through coping that I hope will improve our quality of lives that people may not realize. So quality of life isn't necessarily, what you'd say, like more money in our bank account, but a quality of life is by having better relational skills, I believe, too. And that we're all designed for relationships because we do need each other to help each other through it all. And we're more resilient and can handle harder things than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. But remembering that not only can I handle hard things, but so can the people around me, that then opens us up for connection. So here is my contact information. There's a lot of stuff in there that I did because of time have to either skip or not get through. I'm really sorry. that I couldn't cover it all with you today, but I can make myself available in the future if you want to reach out. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Lisa. We really appreciate you sharing so much with us. And I'm hoping that maybe we can take you up on part 2 so we can delve a little more deeply into the practical applications of some of this, especially within our ministry contexts or in our lives in general. So, but thank you so much, and hope you get the feeling better, and we appreciate your time. And Jackie and Samira, thank you for being on as well. And Karen, who's gone, but we're so very glad that you were with us today. And blessings to you all.